this is the Butt and Breneman show. Maybe no one's feeling better than Adam Breneman. Big win for the Penn State Nittany Lions last week. But that's not the headline of the conference, Adam. So excuse me, all right? I want to start with the Indiana
What do you mean it's
Hoosiers.
not the headline? Okay.
The Indiana Hoosiers are the freaking headline, baby. Absolutely rolling. 5-0 for the first time since 1967. The last time that happened, the Hoosiers went to the Rose Bowl, baby. Curt Cignetti tried to tell us. He said, Google me. My goodness. Is it the headline? I guess maybe it's the headline for me. Is it the headline for you? What's impressed you about the Hoosiers?
It's definitely the headline. Jake, it may be one of the greatest calling of your own shots that we've seen in college football. To go up to media day, or I think it was actually his introductory press conference, and say, I win, Google me. It'll go down in history, especially if Indiana can run the table here and make some noise in competing for a Big Ten championship. So, I mean, just the confidence that Curt Cignetti's brought to that program. When you bring in a transfer quarterback like Curtis Rourke, who's played a lot of football and has seen it and has seen how to win and has seen how you don't win games as well when he was in the MAC. So there's a lot of confidence around that program, and I'm excited to see how it plays out, man. I mean, they got an interesting schedule that. They got to play Ohio State and Michigan, but they got some games there that are winnable coming up on their schedule. There's a scenario here where Indiana could be sitting at 10-2, and anything can happen depending on what goes down at the top of the Big Ten.
Hey, those games are winnable as far as I'm concerned. I mean, this is a good football team, and I was calling that game last week, and we were wondering what would they do with the first sign of adversity. And I mean, Curtis Rourke, uncharacteristic interception. Defense comes out there 3 and out, didn't blink. They get the ball again. I'm thinking maybe they'll run it. They go right back to it. Another interception. You're like, what the heck's going on? Defense comes out there, another 3 and out. And like the thing about Curt, it didn't even phase them. It was like a fly on your windshield when you're steaming down the highway. The interceptions meant nothing. They just continued their operation. They know exactly who they are. That is a dangerous, dangerous football team. Now you got to be allergic to the big meal. Eat crumbs. Northwestern, that's a disciplined defense. Then you're going into your bye week. All of a sudden, the back half of the schedule is juicy. You mentioned Michigan, Ohio State, 2 huge games for both of those programs this weekend. It's a rematch of the national championship, so let's start there. It is a rematch, but it's completely different. New head coach, new quarterback, new rosters. Washington is favored in that game.
Yeah.
Help me make sense of that. Why could that be?
When you can't score points and you can't throw the football, your margin of error for victory is so small. You can't make mistakes. You can't have penalties. You can't have turnovers. And I don't think Michigan's good enough all around to make up for their lack of offensive explosion. Now that we're starting to see some of these cross-country trips in the Big Ten, and is there any factor coming off a literal cross-country trip to Rutgers last week that Washington went on, and now they're traveling back and changing time zones? We haven't quite seen a bunch of that yet, so it'll be interesting to see if that plays a factor. Then a guy that you've talked about, Jake, is Will Rogers. I mean, he's got 10 touchdowns and no interceptions this season, completing 75% of his passes. If Washington's going to win this game, it's going to be because Will Rogers plays really well, doesn't turn the football over, and Washington overpowers Michigan on offense.
Dude, he's quietly put together one of the best seasons of any quarterback in the conference. It really shouldn't be quiet. Like he's playing some of the best football of his career. Denzel Boston, Giles Jackson, like they got studs at wide receiver. I love Jonah Coleman too. Now it was Monungai. Now people know about Monungai. Jonah Coleman's the most underrated back in the conference. So Michigan's will have their hands full. And then the question is hey, the headline for Washington's really been their defense, and it's Steve Belichick. So when you think about the name Belichick, as a defensive coordinator, he's going to take away the strength of the offense. It's going to be tough to run the ball versus Washington this weekend. Like Belichick is going to have these guys gap sound, gap discipline in position. They're going to really Michigan. It's been their explosive runs. Like when teams don't have layers, Michigan popped a run early against Minnesota because there was no layers. They brought pressure, but then everyone's on the same level like a wall, and Mullings breaks through for a touchdown. Teams are going to continue to adapt and make it challenging on Michigan. Huge matchup.
Jake, when you look at Michigan's remaining schedule, I mean, they got some tough games now coming up.
Oh, yeah.
With at Washington, at Illinois, Oregon at home, I think it is. They're at Indiana, which now is a tough matchup. They're at Ohio State.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a chance that Michigan's an underdog in 5 of those games in the rest
Oh
of their
yeah.
schedule, depending on how things play out. I mean, it's just when I think about their offense in those games, man, you got to be able to score points. And I almost hope I'm proved wrong about this for your sake, especially. But I just have a hard time seeing how Michigan comes out of there not with a better record than 8-4 at the end of the season in the Big Ten.
Yeah, no, I mean they got to figure something. They have to get something in the passing game, and whether that's with Alex Orji or maybe you go to a 2 quarterback system with Davis Warren or Jack Tuttle. I don't know, but clearly, like they have to be able to throw the ball, and they can't do it right now. So,
Yeah.
one team that can throw the ball, Ohio State. We've been wondering what they'll look like when they're first tested, and as good as that offense has looked, we know what Phil Parker and the Hawkeyes defense brings to town. So, just want to kind of give you the floor. Huge matchup there for both the Hawkeyes, right? I mean, they lost a game versus they don't have much margin for error if they want to continue to climb and be considered one of the top teams in the conference. And for the Buckeyes, obviously, really the first big test in terms of defensive output they've seen all year.
It's the first chance for Ohio State to kind of prove that ranking in the top few teams of college football, considering their first 4 games, of Akron and Western Michigan and Marshall. Obviously played Michigan State last week. So this is kind of their first test against a good defense, and it's a chance too for Will Howard to prove that he belongs in that conversation. There's been ups and downs to Will Howard's game through the first 4 weeks. And, to Ohio State's credit, there is something to be said about handling business when you're supposed to handle business. Ohio State handled Michigan State down the stretch of that game. Will Howard played really well. So to me, I want to see Ohio State come out fast in this game and look like a better team than Iowa, look like a faster team, be explosive on offense early, because it starts now their really tough stretch to the season where they got Iowa, they got Oregon, they got Penn State coming up soon, which will be a huge game. And if we know anything about Iowa, they play well in road games under Kirk Ferentz, especially top 10 road games. He's got a handful of wins in these kind of top 10 road game. Most coaches are like, 0 in those games. Kirk Ferentz has 3 or 4 wins in top 10 road games. So it's going to be exciting to see how Iowa, handles Will Howard. And I think for Iowa, the key is getting Will Howard off rhythm early in this game. Get him in some third down and longs. And for Iowa, if they're going to win this game or stay in it, they got to they got to steal a possession at some point in this game. They got to block a kick. They got to get a big turnover. They got to force a turnover early in this game. Steal possession. Don't let Ohio State score too many points early, and then try to get to the third, fourth quarter with a 1-score game. Anything can happen.
Yeah, I like that a lot, man. And I think, the interesting thing about Ohio State's offense with Chip Kelly calling plays, it's almost like a triple option in the sense like they have so many different elements, like their RPO that can turn into a screen and some of their fake run actions that turn into a reverse. Like they force you to defend everything. And for Iowa's defense, that means all 11 guys have to singularly do their individual job and trust the man next to him that he'll do his. But they've given up some explosives this year, the Hawkeyes defense. Very uncharacteristic.
The other thing about Ohio State's offense, Jake, that people forget when you think about Chip Kelly, everyone thinks about the spread offense and throwing the ball around. Chip Kelly loves to run the football. When he was with the Eagles as their head coach, I remember, I'm an Eagles fan. I remember they were great when they led the NFL in rushing a couple of those years. So, you look at guys like Quinshon Judkins and Trayvon Henderson, they're both averaging over 8 yards a carry. And both of them, I think, have 30 some plus carries on the year already when they're barely playing in the second half of any of these games. So they're going to run the football, and that just helps Will Howard so much. Jake, great call. Like what they're running is essentially triple option offense. There a lot of it's just RPO game where Will Howard either is handing the ball off, if not, he's pulling it, and he's got multiple options there, whether he runs it himself, whether he's going to throw the football, and with all the different playmakers and the skill position guys they have, it's really tough to defend.
Yeah, man. It's and then on the flip side too, Caleb Johnson, best running back in the Big Ten thus far, man. Just the stats have been phenomenal. And the Hawkeyes offensive line, this is the best their offensive line's played in a number of years. Best front they'll face. So I'm excited to see those guys and the Hawkeye tight ends face Ohio State's D-line.
Yeah, what's the key to you if Iowa wins this game or stays in it at least to the fourth quarter? What do you think needs to happen?
I think you're spot on in the sense like they have to force some turnovers. Like of course,
Yeah,
when you force it, that's 7 points. You can almost expect Ohio State's going to get some type of points. So when
yeah,
you force a turnover, you eliminate that. Then typically what that would mean is you're giving your offense good field position, and at that point you need to capitalize. They've been they need to create some explosives in the run game. Like they're just
yeah.
not built to drive the ball consistently versus Ohio State. So they got to create some type of
Yeah.
explosives in there, and Ohio State's defense really doesn't give those up all too
I was
often.
just talking to someone about this. You make a good point on needing explosives on offense, and this conversation came up about Michigan. Someone mentioned to me Michigan's, I think, averaging like 4 yards a carry and running the ball a ton. And the point that this person was trying to make was that, listen, if you run the ball 4 yards a carry, like that's fine, you're getting first downs. But back to the margin of error conversation in these types of offenses, if you don't have explosive plays and you have to put 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 play drives together, every play is a chance for a turnover. Every
Yeah.
play is a chance for something to go wrong. Every play is a chance to get behind the sticks with a penalty, one holding call, one offensive PI, one false start. You're now behind the sticks, and that 4 yards of carry doesn't help anymore. It's so hard to put those big drives together because the margin of error gets so small that you can't make any mistakes. Now, when you have the explosive plays, that mitigates everything. It
Yeah.
really makes up for a lot of those mistakes. So those offenses that don't have it, especially on first and second down, Jake, I just saw a great stat about how the third down conversion it's important in football, but the real stat that matters a ton is the first downs you get on first and second down.
Yeah.
And can you move the chains early? That's where the explosive plays come. I thought that was really interesting because we focus so much as analysts on how are they on third down, but how many first downs are they getting when it's first and 10, when it's second
Yeah.
and 8?
That's the key. It's like, hey, what's third down percentage? How about avoiding third down altogether?
Exactly.
Like
Yeah.
that's and with the explosives, my wife and I were in Italy for our honeymoon, and we were doing some hiking, and hiking to the top of the mountain, it's fun, it's
Yeah.
beautiful, but I can only really do that a few times. If I take the gondola up, I can go up and down that mountain all day long. That's
Yeah.
kind of the analogy there from an explosive play standpoint.
How was Italy? Good time in Italy?
Beautiful. Great
Really?
food, great people. Yeah, we got a little bit
Yeah.
of everything out there. So, hey,
Love it.
last game real quick. Rutgers, Nebraska. Nebraska's favored. Rutgers continues. They I think they should be ranked. They had a good road win versus Virginia Tech. Found a way versus Washington. That's the name of the game. What are you looking for in that matchup?
Man, Rutgers has to keep putting these games together, man. I mean, you huge win against Washington, as you said. Um, you look at Rutgers' schedule the rest of the year. I know we're playing the schedule game a lot today, but I mean, no Ohio State, no Penn State,
Yeah.
no Oregon, no Michigan. They will likely. I was looking at their schedule earlier today. They'll likely only be an underdog in one or two of the remaining games. So
Yeah.
they're a dog against Nebraska, and then maybe be a dog against USC. So I mean, there's a world here where we have an 11-1, 10-2 Rutgers team
Think
that's
about
vying
that.
for a Big Ten championship, or right on the outskirts of the conference championship game, and then 10-2 didn't make the championship game on the bubble of the college football playoff as an at-large bid. So now what that means is that every single one of these games is important, and what I just said doesn't matter if they lose in Nebraska, right? So this is
Yeah.
a chance for Greg Schiano to take his team on the road. Everyone's telling them how good they are right now. That's the thing I keep thinking about, man. Like when you have excitement and hype when you weren't supposed to have it, it's tough not to read your own press clippings, man. It's
I
tough. I
know.
mean, we've all been there. It's tough not to believe it. But if there's anything that I know, Greg Schiano's great at building culture, keeping his guys locked in. And he's got one of the best running backs in the country in Kyle Monangai, who's going to have a day against this Nebraska defense that's been pretty good against the run.
Yeah, he would always say we're a developmental program.
Yeah,
And what that means is when you have a roster that's so senior and veteran heavy like what they have, then that's the year it's got to be. And the stars have
no
aligned.
doubt.
You mentioned the schedule. You mentioned, hey, you got Callie McManus playing the best football of his career at
Man, he
quarterback.
looks good, man. Yeah,
Man, he does.
yeah.
They haven't had that for a while. So meanwhile, gosh, Nebraska, that fan base is starved. Like they're saying, please, they know this is going to be a good game. Like, please, can we get a win?
Yeah.
So
You,
Big Ten football, it's the gift that keeps on giving,
you
baby.
know
Another
what's
great
interesting?
weekend.
It's going to be interesting, Jake, as this show goes on throughout the year, for us to think about the scenarios of what scenario teams would want. You think about Rutgers, if they do win this game against Nebraska and kind of run the table or win, end up 10-2. Would Rutgers rather make the Big Ten championship game and then maybe lose to Ohio State or lose to, depending on how it plays out? Or would you rather be 10-2, miss the conference championship game, and then you're on the bubble, and instead of having to lose a conference championship game and then they're definitely out of the playoff, you have a chance. It's just going to be interesting to see how it all plays out and how teams are kind of vying for playoff spots.
That's the best part about the expanded playoff is like now we'll have like 25 or 30 teams. Like starting in November, there's going to be 25 or 30 teams with at least some scenario to getting to the playoffs. Yeah. So we'll keep you guys all covered here on the Breneman and Butt Show. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks for tuning in.